A Werewolf Shifter Romance by Lena, from Lena's Romance Library. Chapter 1. The Arrangement. The iron gates of the Black Moon Estate loomed before me like the entrance to hell itself, their twisted metal bars seeming to reach out with clawed fingers. My hands trembled as I gripped the worn leather handles of my single suitcase, the only possession I had left in this world. The autumn wind whipped through my long auburn hair, carrying with it the scent of pine and something else, something wild and dangerous that made my skin prickle with unease. "This is it, Lyra." My stepmother's voice cut through the howling wind like a blade. Margaret's cold blue eyes held no warmth, no sympathy for what she was condemning me to. "Your father's debts won't pay themselves, and this arrangement will clear them all. You should be grateful." Grateful. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. At 18, I was being sold like cattle to a man I'd never met, Dominic Blackmoon, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. The stories about him were whispered in hushed tones throughout our small mountain town. A ruthless leader who ruled with an iron fist, whose very presence could make grown men tremble. They said he was cursed, that he'd never taken a mate because no woman could survive his darkness. And now I was meant to be his bride. "He's old enough to be my father," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the wind. "Please, Margaret." "There has to be another way." "There is no other way," she snapped, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my arm through my thin coat. "Your father left us with nothing but debts and shame. Do you want to end up on the streets? This is the only option that keeps us from losing everything." The gates creaked open as if sensing our presence, and a black sedan waited beyond them. The driver was a mountain of a man with silver hair and scars crisscrossing his weathered face. When he looked at me, his eyes flashed with something that wasn't entirely human. My blood ran cold. "Miss Lyra?" His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. "I'm Marcus, the Alpha's beta. He's waiting for you." I wanted to run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around and flee into the forest, to take my chances with the wolves and whatever else lurked in these mountains rather than face whatever waited for me in that imposing mansion. But Margaret's grip on my arm was unrelenting, and I knew there was nowhere to go. The debts were real. The threats from the loan sharks were real. This arrangement was the only thing standing between my family and complete destruction. The drive up the winding mountain road felt like a funeral procession. Through the tinted windows, I caught glimpses of the Black Moon territory. Endless forests of towering pines, rocky cliffs that disappeared into mist, and an overwhelming sense of being watched by unseen eyes. The mansion itself was a Gothic masterpiece of dark stone and towering spires, its windows glowing like amber eyes in the gathering dusk. "The Alpha has specific rules," Marcus said as we pulled into the circular drive. "You're not to wander the grounds alone after dark. You're not to enter the east wing without permission. And you're never to go into the forest during a full moon." "Why?" The question slipped out before I could stop myself. His eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, and for a moment, they seemed to glow with an inner light. "Because some hungers are too dangerous to resist, and you smell far too tempting for your own good." My heart hammered against my ribs as the car came to a stop. Through the windshield, I could see the massive front doors of the mansion opening, spilling golden light across the stone steps. And there, silhouetted against that light like a figure from a nightmare, stood Dominic Blackmoon. Even from a distance, his presence was overwhelming. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the doorframe and an aura of barely contained power that seemed to ripple through the air around him. His hair was dark as midnight with threads of silver at the temples, and when he stepped into the light, I could see the sharp angles of his face, the predatory grace in every movement. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch in my throat. Even from here, I could see them burning with an intensity that seemed to see straight through me, as if he could read every secret I'd ever kept, every fear that haunted my dreams. "Out!" Margaret hissed, shoving me toward the car door. "Remember what I told you. Be obedient. Be grateful. And for God's sake, don't give him any reason to break the contract." My legs felt like water as I climbed out of the sedan, clutching my suitcase like a shield. The mountain air was thin and cold, carrying scents I couldn't identify, wild and earthy and tinged with something that made my pulse quicken. Dominic Blackmoon began walking down the steps toward me, each footfall measured and deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Up close, he was even more imposing than I'd imagined. His suit was perfectly tailored, emphasizing the powerful lines of his body, but there was something untamed about him that no amount of civilized clothing could hide. His face was carved from granite. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and those burning amber eyes that seemed to look right into my soul. He stopped just an arm's length away, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could catch the scent of cedar and smoke, and something wild that made my head spin. For a long moment, he simply stared at me, his gaze traveling from my face down to my feet and back again, as if he were cataloging every detail. "So young," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through my bones. "Barely more than a child." The words stung, even though they were true. "I'm 18, I said, lifting my chin with more courage than I felt. "Old enough to make my own choices." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or approval. "Are you? And is this your choice, little one? Or are you here because others have made choices for you?" The question was like a knife to the heart, laying bare the truth I'd been trying so hard to deny. I wasn't here by choice. I was here because I was a commodity to be traded, a solution to someone else's problems. But admitting that felt like admitting defeat, and I wasn't ready to surrender what little dignity I had left. "I'm here," I said simply. "That's what matters, isn't it?" He studied me for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "Indeed it is." He turned to Margaret, who had been hovering nearby like a vulture. "The contract has been fulfilled. You may go." "But surely we should discuss the details," Margaret began. "Now." The single word carried such authority, such barely leashed power, that Margaret actually took a step back. She shot me one last meaningful look, then scurried back to the sedan without another word. As the car disappeared down the mountain road, taking with it my last connection to the world I'd known, I felt utterly alone. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the whisper of wind through the pines and the distant call of something that might have been a wolf. "Come," Dominic said finally, extending his hand. "You must be cold." I stared at his outstretched hand, large, strong, with calluses that spoke of hard work despite his obvious wealth. There was something about touching him that felt dangerous, like grabbing a live wire. But what choice did I have? The moment my fingers brushed his, electricity shot up my arm. His hand was warm, almost burning against my cold skin, and I could have sworn I felt his pulse sync with mine. His eyes widened slightly, as if he'd felt it too, but then his expression shuttered closed. "Interesting," he murmured, more to himself than to me. He led me up the stone steps and through the massive front doors into a foyer that belonged in a museum. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by carved pillars, and a grand staircase curved upward like something from a fairy tale. Ancient tapestries hung from the walls, depicting scenes of hunts and battles, and everywhere there were candles casting dancing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. "Mrs. Chen will show you to your room," Dominic said, gesturing to an elderly Asian woman who had appeared as silently as a ghost. You'll have tonight to settle in. Tomorrow, we'll discuss the terms of our arrangement." "What kind of terms?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. His smile was sharp as a blade. "The kind that will determine whether you survive your time here, little mate." The word mate sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. There was something in the way he said it. Something primal and possessive that made my skin flush with heat despite my fear. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat delicately. "This way, miss." As I followed the housekeeper up the grand staircase, I could feel Dominic's eyes burning into my back. At the top of the stairs, I couldn't resist looking over my shoulder. He was still standing in the foyer, watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. For just a moment, I could have sworn his eyes flashed gold in the candlelight. Then Mrs. Chen led me around a corner, and he vanished from sight. My room was beautiful in the way that gilded cages are beautiful, luxurious and comfortable, but unmistakably a prison. The four-poster bed was draped in midnight blue silk, and a fire crackled in the marble fireplace, casting warm light over Persian rugs and antique furniture. French doors opened onto a balcony that overlooked the forest, though heavy curtains were drawn across them. "The Alpha has left clothes for you in the wardrobe," Mrs. Chen said, her voice kind but careful. "Dinner will be served at 8. I suggest you rest until then. You look exhausted, child." She was right. The stress of the day, the fear, the overwhelming presence of Dominic Blackmoon, it all crashed over me at once. After she left, I collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, staring up at the canopy above me. What had I gotten myself into? This place felt wrong somehow, charged with an energy that made my skin crawl and my pulse race at the same time. And Dominic. There was something about him that defied explanation. The way he moved, the way his eyes seemed to glow, the electric shock when we'd touched, none of it made sense. But as exhaustion finally claimed me, pulling me down into uneasy sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just taken a turn into something far stranger and more dangerous than a simple arranged marriage. In my dreams, amber eyes watched me from the shadows, and something howled in the darkness beyond the trees. Chapter 2. The Beast Beneath. I woke to the sound of howling. At first, I thought it was part of the nightmare that had plagued my sleep. Visions of golden eyes and shadowy forms stalking through moonlit forests. But as consciousness fully returned, I realized the haunting sound was real, drifting through the heavy curtains from somewhere deep in the woods surrounding the Blackmoon estate. The ornate clock on the mantelpiece read 7:47 p.m. I'd slept for hours, and dinner was in 13 minutes. Panic shot through me as I scrambled off the bed, my wrinkled clothes a testament to my exhausted collapse. The wardrobe Mrs. Chen had mentioned stood open, revealing an array of dresses that would have cost more than my family's monthly rent. I selected the most conservative option, a deep emerald dress with long sleeves and a modest neckline, and quickly changed, my hands shaking as I tried to smooth down my tangled hair. The howling came again, closer this time, and I found myself drawn to the French doors. Despite Mrs. Chen's earlier kindness, I couldn't shake the memory of Marcus's warning. "You're not to wander the grounds alone after dark." But I wasn't going outside. Just looking couldn't hurt, could it? I pulled back the heavy curtains and immediately gasped. The balcony overlooked a vast expanse of wilderness that stretched to the horizon, where mountains rose like sleeping giants against the star-studded sky. But it wasn't the breathtaking view that made my blood run cold. It was the eyes. Dozens of them, glowing like amber lanterns in the darkness between the trees. They watched the mansion with an intelligence that was far too human for comfort. A soft knock at the door made me jump away from the windows, my heart hammering. "Come in," I called, trying to sound calmer than I felt. Mrs. Chen entered carrying a tea service, her weathered face creased with concern. "You look pale, child. Bad dreams?" "I heard howling," I said. "And there are things in the forest, watching." She set the tea tray down with practiced efficiency, but I caught the slight tremor in her hands. "The mountains are full of wildlife. Nothing to concern yourself with, so long as you follow the Alpha's rules." There it was again, that word, Alpha. Not Lord, not Sir, not even Mister. Alpha, like he was the leader of a pack instead of a man. "Mrs. Chen," I said carefully, "what exactly is Dominic Blackmoon?" Her dark eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something like pity flash across her face. "He's a man carrying burdens you couldn't imagine, child. And now, whether he likes it or not, those burdens are yours to share." Before I could ask what that meant, she was gone, leaving me with more questions than answers, and the lingering scent of jasmine tea. The dining room was a study in Gothic elegance, a long mahogany table that could seat 20, illuminated by a massive chandelier, whose crystals cast rainbow fragments across dark, wood-paneled walls. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors gazed down from their gilded frames, and I couldn't shake the feeling that their painted eyes were following my every move. Dominic was already seated at the head of the table, having changed from his earlier suit into dark jeans and a black sweater that clung to his powerful frame. The casual clothes should have made him less intimidating, but somehow they had the opposite effect. They emphasized the predatory grace in his movements, the barely leashed power that seemed to radiate from every inch of his imposing form. "You look better," he said as I approached, his amber eyes taking in the emerald dress with obvious approval. "That color suits you." I took the seat he indicated, close enough that I could smell his intoxicating scent of cedar and smoke, but far enough that I didn't feel completely trapped. "Thank you. The clothes are generous. They're practical." He lifted a wineglass to his lips, and I found myself mesmerized by the elegant movement of his throat as he swallowed. "You can hardly perform your duties in rags." The word duties sent a chill down my spine. "What duties?" His smile was sharp as winter frost. "Patience, little mate. All will be explained in time." Mrs. Chen appeared with the first course, a delicate soup that smelled divine but which I could barely taste past the anxiety clawing at my throat. Dominic, however, ate with obvious relish, his table manners impeccable despite the predatory way his eyes never left my face. "Tell me about yourself, Lyra," he said, setting down his spoon. "What did you do before your stepmother sold you to me?" The blunt phrasing made me wince. "I was in school. I wanted to study literature, maybe become a teacher." "Wanted?" Past tense? I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Hard to pursue dreams when you're here. "And where is here exactly?" "What do you think this place is?" The question felt like a trap, but I was tired of dancing around the truth. "A prison," I said. "A very beautiful one, but a prison nonetheless." To my surprise, he laughed, a rich, dark sound that seemed to vibrate through my bones. Honest. I like that. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those unsettling amber eyes. "But you're wrong. This isn't a prison, Lyra. It's a sanctuary. The question is whether you're strong enough to deserve its protection." Before I could ask what that meant, the howling began again. Closer now, so close it seemed to be coming from the grounds themselves. I couldn't suppress a shiver, and Dominic's nostrils flared slightly, as if he could smell my fear. "They're restless tonight," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "They?" "My pack." The words slipped out so casually, so matter-of-factly, that it took a moment for its significance to hit me. Pack. Like wolves. Like the eyes I'd seen watching from the forest. "I don't understand," I whispered, though deep down, some primal part of me was beginning to. Dominic rose from his chair with fluid grace, moving to stand behind me. I felt the heat of his body, caught his wild scent, and every nerve ending in my body came alive with warning, or desire. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. "Look at me, Lyra." His voice was different now, deeper, more commanding, with an undertone that bypassed rational thought and spoke directly to something ancient and instinctual within me. Against my will, I turned to face him. His eyes were glowing. Not reflecting the light, actually glowing with an inner fire that was definitely not human. As I watched in frozen terror, his canine teeth elongated into fangs, and I could hear the sound of bones shifting beneath his skin. "What are you?" I breathed. "I am the Alpha King of the Northern Pack," he said, his voice now carrying a growling undertone that raised every hair on my body. "I am the guardian of these mountains, the protector of my people, and the hunter of those who would threaten what is mine." His hand reached out to cut my cheek, and I could feel claws pricking against my skin. "And you, little mate, are about to become part of something far greater and more dangerous than your small human mind can comprehend." I should have screamed. I should have run. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my body responding to his proximity in ways that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. "The stories are true," I whispered. "You're a monster?" His smile revealed those deadly fangs. "Oh yes, little one. I am exactly the monster your nightmares warned you about. The question is, are you brave enough to love a beast?" The word love hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't love. This was insanity, a twisted arrangement born of desperation and debt. But as his thumb traced across my cheekbone, as his golden eyes bored into mine with an intensity that seemed to see straight into my soul, I felt something shift inside me. A recognition. A call answered by something deep and primal that I hadn't even known existed. "I don't understand any of this," I said, my voice barely audible. "You will." His hand moved to the base of my throat, his claws lightly tracing the pulse point there. "Your scent, it's changing. The wolf in me recognizes what you are, even if you don't yet understand it yourself." "What am I?" Before he could answer, a tremendous crash came from somewhere deep in the house, followed by shouting and the sound of splintering wood. Dominic's head snapped toward the noise, his entire body going rigid with alert tension. "Stay here," he commanded, but his voice was already shifting, becoming more growl than words. "What's happening?" Another crash, closer now, and the unmistakable sound of something large and furious smashing through the mansion's interior. Dominic cursed in a language I didn't recognize, his form already beginning to blur and shift as whatever careful control he maintained over his beast began to slip. "The East Wing?" he snarled, his words barely intelligible now. "Someone's breached the East Wing." He was changing before my eyes, his body expanding, muscles bulging, dark hair sprouting along his arms and throat. The civilized veneer I'd glimpsed was dissolving, revealing the true predator beneath. "Run," he said, and this time his voice was purely animal. "Run and hide, little mate, and pray they don't catch your scent." Then he was gone, moving with inhuman speed toward whatever threat had invaded his domain. I was left alone in the dining room, trembling and confused, as sounds of violence echoed through the mansion. Roars that definitely weren't human, the crash of furniture being destroyed, and underneath it all, a howling that raised every primitive instinct I possessed. I should have done as he said. I should have run to my room and hidden under the bed like a child. Instead, I found myself drawn toward the sounds of battle, my feet carrying me through corridors I'd never seen before, past rooms draped in shadows and secrets. The East Wing. Marcus had specifically warned me away from the East Wing. And now something, or someone, had broken into the very place I'd been forbidden to enter. As I crept through the darkened hallways, following the sounds of destruction, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening tonight would change everything. The careful negotiations, the arranged marriage, the civilized facade of dinner conversation, it was all about to shatter, revealing truths I might not be strong enough to bear. But I kept walking anyway, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't name toward whatever waited in the forbidden depths of Dominic Blackmoon's domain. Behind me, the howling of the pack grew closer, as if they too were converging on the source of the disturbance. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, something roared with a fury that made my blood turn to ice. I was about to discover that there were worse things than arranged marriages to monsters. Some secrets were worth dying to protect. Chapter 3. Blood and Moonlight. The east wing of the mansion felt different from the rest of the house. Older, wilder, thrumming with an energy that made my skin crawl and my pulse race. As I crept through corridors lit only by flickering torches, the very walls seemed to whisper warnings I couldn't understand. The sounds of battle grew louder with each step. Roars that definitely weren't human, the crash of splintering wood, and underneath it all, a wet tearing sound that made bile rise in my throat. Whatever was happening ahead, it was violent and brutal, and absolutely not something an 18-year-old girl should witness. But I couldn't turn back. Some force beyond logic or self-preservation pulled me forward, as if invisible strings were dragging me toward whatever truth waited in the darkness. The hallway opened into a vast circular chamber dominated by an enormous stone altar. Ancient symbols were carved deep into its surface, stained dark with what I prayed wasn't blood. Chains hung from iron rings set into the walls, and the air itself seemed thick with centuries of pain and transformation. But it wasn't the room that stopped my heart. It was what occupied it. Two massive wolves circled each other in the chamber's center, their lips pulled back to reveal fangs that gleamed like ivory daggers in the torchlight. One was dark as midnight with amber eyes that I recognized despite his shifted form. Dominic. The other was larger, silver gray with scars crisscrossing his muzzle and rage burning in his pale green gaze. They moved with deadly grace, muscles coiled and ready to strike, and I realized I was witnessing something primal and terrible, an alpha challenge that could only end in death. The silver wolf lunged first, jaws snapping at Dominic's throat. They collided with a sound like thunder, rolling across the stone floor in a tangle of fur and fangs and snarling fury. When they broke apart, both bore fresh wounds that leaked crimson onto the ancient stones. "You grow weak, old friend," the silver wolf spoke, his voice somehow emanating from his lupine throat with a grinding, inhuman quality. Soft, from too many years of playing human. "And you grow foolish, Garrett," Dominic replied, circling his opponent with predatory patience. "Did you think I wouldn't smell your ambition? Your hunger for what isn't yours to take?" Garrett. Even in his wolf form, I could see the resemblance to Marcus, the same scarred features, the same warrior's bearing. But where the beta had shown me careful respect, this wolf radiated barely contained violence. "She's not your mate," Garrett snarled, his pale eyes flicking toward where I stood frozen in the doorway. "She's human. Weak. She'll break the bloodline, corrupt our pure heritage with her mortality. That's not your decision to make, isn't it?" Garrett's laugh was a sound like breaking glass. "The pack questions your judgment, Dominic. Some say you've lost your way, that your obsession with the human world has made you forget what we are. What we are is not what we were. Times change, Garrett. We adapt or we die. We are apex predators." Garrett's form seemed to grow larger, fed by his rage. We are not meant to bow to human customs or chain ourselves to weak flesh. The old ways nearly destroyed us. Dominic cut him off. I've spent 30 years rebuilding what your precious old ways tore down. I won't let you undo that progress because you're too narrow-minded to see beyond your own prejudices. They clashed again, and this time the violence was even more brutal. Claws raked across flesh, leaving deep gouges that healed almost as quickly as they appeared. The sound of their snarls echoed off the stone walls like the fury of ancient gods, and the metallic scent of blood filled the air. I should have been terrified. Should have turned and run as fast as my legs could carry me back to the safety of my gilded cage. Instead, I found myself stepping further into the chamber, drawn by something I couldn't name. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, both wolves froze. Dominic's head swung toward me, his amber eyes widening with something like horror. Lyra, number. Get out of here. Now. But it was too late. The ancient symbols carved into the altar began to glow with pale silver light, and the very air seemed to thicken with power. I could feel it washing over me in waves, old magic, primal and demanding, recognizing something in my blood that I didn't understand. Garrett's lips pulled back in a savage grin. So, the human enters the sacred space during the full moon. How interesting. For the first time, I noticed the moonlight streaming through the chamber's skylight, painting everything in ethereal silver. The full moon. Marcus had specifically warned me about the full moon. "What's happening?" I whispered. But even as the words left my lips, I could feel changes beginning in my body. My skin felt too tight, too hot, and there was a pressure building behind my eyes that made the world blur and shift. "She has the blood," Garrett said, and now his voice held something like awe. "Dormant, but it's there. I can smell it awakening." "That's impossible," Dominic snarled, but his eyes never left my face. "She's fully human." I checked her lineage myself. The pain hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest, driving me to my knees on the cold stone floor. Fire raced through my veins, and I could hear the sound of my own bones beginning to shift and crack. Somewhere far away, I was screaming, but the sound seemed to come from another person entirely. "The sacred space calls to her," Garrett continued, his tone now coldly clinical. "The altar recognizes her blood. She's not fully human, brother. She never was." Through the haze of agony, I saw Dominic's form begin to shift back toward human, but the change was wrong somehow. Incomplete. He retained his claws, his fangs, his glowing amber eyes, as if he couldn't quite let go of his wolf. "Fight it, Lyra," he commanded, but his voice was strained. "Don't let the moon take you. You're not ready for this." "Ready for what?" I gasped between waves of pain. "Your first transformation," Garrett answered with obvious satisfaction. "The awakening of your true nature." "Tell me, little girl, did you never wonder why you could see so clearly in the dark? Why your senses were sharper than other humans? Why you felt drawn to wild places and had dreams of running through forests on 4 legs?" His words hit like physical blows because they were true. All of it. The dreams, the enhanced senses, the way I'd always felt like I didn't quite belong in the human world. It all suddenly made terrible sense. "You're lying," I whispered, but even as I said it, I could feel my canine teeth lengthening, could feel my nails hardening into claws. "The bloodline runs true, even when diluted," Garrett said. "Somewhere in your ancestry, little girl, wolf blood flows. And now, in this sacred space under the full moon's power, that blood is awakening." Dominic was beside me now, his partially shifted hands surprisingly gentle as they framed my face. "Look at me, Lyra. Focus on my voice. You can control this. You don't have to let it take you. Can't, I sobbed, feeling my spine beginning to elongate, my muscles stretching and changing. Hurts too much. I know. His thumbs brushed away tears I didn't realize I was shedding. But pain is just the price of transformation. You're strong enough for this. I felt it the moment I met you. Such touching sentiment, Garrett drawled, but ultimately pointless. An untrained wolf, shifting for the first time in a sacred space during the full moon. She'll be wild, uncontrollable. She could kill you both before dawn. She won't, Dominic said with absolute certainty. She's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have angered me, but instead it sent a shock of heat through my changing body. Mine. Yes, something deep inside me whispered. His. The transformation reached its crescendo, and the world exploded into sensation. I could smell everything, the metallic tang of spilled blood, the musk of male wolves, the lingering traces of every person who'd ever entered this chamber. I could hear the heartbeats of small creatures in the walls, the whisper of wind through the mansion's corridors, the distant howling of the pack. And I could see with perfect clarity, despite the chamber's dim lighting, every detail sharp and vivid as if painted with liquid moonlight. I looked down at my hands and saw paws covered in auburn fur that matched my human hair. My body felt different, stronger, faster, more alive than it had ever been. The pain was gone, replaced by a wild joy that made me want to run and hunt and howl at the moon that had awakened me. But underneath the animal euphoria was something else, a connection I could feel thrumming in my bones. Dominic. Even in wolf form, I could sense him like a second heartbeat, could smell his unique scent of cedar and smoke and something indefinably him. Mate, the wolf whispered in my mind. Alpha. Home. Beautiful, Dominic murmured, and when I looked at him, his eyes were filled with something that might have been reverence. I've never seen such a perfect first shift. Garrett snarled, clearly displeased by how smoothly my transformation had gone. It proves nothing. She's still weak, still human at heart. The pack will never accept. His words cut off as I spun toward him, lips pulled back to reveal fangs that could tear out his throat. The rational part of my mind was horrified by the violent impulse, but my wolf was furious at his dismissal, at his implication that I wasn't worthy of my place here. Careful, Garrett, Dominic said softly. You're insulting my mate. That's not advisable. The tension in the chamber ratcheted up another notch, and I realized this confrontation was far from over. Garrett might have backed down from directly challenging Dominic, but he clearly had no intention of accepting me. And if what he'd said about the pack's doubts was true, Dominic and I were walking into a political minefield that could destroy everything. But as I looked at the man who'd claimed me, who'd helped me through my first transformation with gentle words and steady hands, I realized something that should have terrified me. I didn't want to run anymore. Whatever this world was, whatever dangers it held, I was part of it now. The wolf in me had awakened, and with it came an understanding that went deeper than rational thought. This was where I belonged, with him. In this wild, dangerous, beautiful world that had claimed me as surely as I was claiming it in return. The only question was whether we'd survive long enough to explore what that meant. Chapter 4. The Pack's Judgment. Dawn brought no relief from the previous night's revelations. I woke in my luxurious prison with every muscle in my body aching as if I'd run a marathon, and my mind reeling with memories that felt more like fever dreams. Had I really transformed into a wolf? Had I really felt that wild, intoxicating connection to Dominic that seemed to bypass all rational thought? The soreness in my bones and the lingering taste of copper in my mouth suggested it had all been terrifyingly real. Mrs. Chen brought breakfast along with clothes, jeans, boots, and a thick sweater that looked practical rather than decorative. Her usually kind face was creased with worry, and she kept glancing toward the window as if expecting something terrible to emerge from the forest. "The Alpha requests your presence in the main hall," she said, setting down a tray of food I had no appetite for. "The pack is gathering." My blood ran cold. All of them? The senior members. The council. She wrung her hands, a gesture so unlike her usual composed demeanor that it made my stomach clench with dread. "Child, whatever happens in that room, remember, you are stronger than you know. The wolf in you recognized its home. Trust that instinct." After she left, I stared at my reflection in the ornate mirror. I looked the same as always: auburn hair, green eyes, pale skin that burned easily in the sun. But something was different. There was a wildness in my gaze that hadn't been there before, a predatory awareness that made me understand why Garrett had been able to smell the wolf blood in my veins. I was no longer fully human, if I ever had been. The main hall was a cavernous space dominated by a massive stone fireplace and ancient tapestries depicting wolves running beneath full moons. But it was the occupants that made my steps falter. 20 or more people sat in a rough circle, and every single one of them radiated the same predatory power I'd sensed in Dominic. Men and women of various ages, all watching me with eyes that held too much intelligence, too much wildness to be entirely human. Dominic stood near the fireplace, and even across the room I could feel that strange pull toward him. Stronger now, more insistent, like a tide that wanted to drag me into deeper waters. He'd changed from his battle-worn clothes into dark slacks and a white shirt that emphasized his powerful frame. But there were still healing scratches visible on his throat and hands. "Ah," said a woman with silver-streaked hair and laugh lines around her amber eyes. "The little human who isn't so human after all." "Elena?" Dominic's voice carried a warning. "She's had less than 12 hours to process what she is. Show some restraint." Elena's smile was sharp, but not unkind. "Restraint is for the weak, Alpha. If she's truly meant to be your mate, she needs to prove she can handle our world without kid gloves." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled wolves, and I realized I was being evaluated like a specimen under a microscope. Every breath I took, every movement I made, was being catalogued and judged. "She shifted in the sacred chamber," said a gruff older man with scars across his face, "on her first moon. That's unprecedented. It proves she has the blood," another voice added. "But blood alone doesn't make a Luna." Luna. The word sent a shiver through me. I might not understand all the supernatural politics at play here, but even I knew that a Luna was an Alpha's mate, the female leader of a pack. Where did the blood come from? This from a woman who looked barely older than me, with intricate tattoos covering her arms. If she doesn't know her lineage, how can we trust she won't bring enemies to our door? The questions came faster now, overlapping each other in a cacophony of suspicion and concern. What if she's a plant from the Southern Territories? Her scent is wrong, too clean, too human. She's too weak. Look at her. One harsh word and she'll shatter. Enough. Dominic's voice cut through the chatter like a blade, filled with enough authority to silence a room full of apex predators. Lyra is under my protection. Any challenge to her is a challenge to me. Garrett chose that moment to make his entrance, striding into the hall with his chest bare and fresh bandages wrapped around his ribs. The wounds from their fight looked severe, but he moved with only the slightest stiffness. "How convenient," he said, his pale green eyes finding mine across the room. "The Alpha protects his pet human while she hides behind his strength." The insult hit its mark, sparking the wolf that now lived beneath my skin. I felt my canines lengthen slightly, felt my nails sharpen, and had to clench my fists to keep from reacting visibly. "She's not hiding behind anything," Elena said with obvious amusement. "Look at her eyes, Garrett. The wolf is rising to your challenge." All attention focused on me, and I realized this was a test, not just of my supernatural heritage, but of my character. Would I cower behind Dominic's protection, or would I face their suspicions head-on? I stepped forward, moving into the center of the circle despite every instinct screaming at me to find the nearest exit. "You want to know about my bloodline. So do I. You want to know if I'm strong enough to be here? So do I." My voice grew steadier with each word, the wolf in me responding to the challenge. "But I'm not going anywhere. Like it or not, I'm part of this pack now." "Part of the pack?" Garrett's laugh was cruel. "You think one night makes you one of us? You don't know our customs, our laws, our history. You can barely control your shift. Then teach me." The words surprised even me with their boldness. "If you're so concerned about my ignorance, educate me. But don't expect me to apologize for existing." A few of the assembled wolves made sounds of approval, but Garrett's expression darkened. "Bold words. But this isn't a human democracy, little girl. Strength rules here. Prove you have it, or get out of our territory." The challenge hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. I looked around the circle of faces, some hostile, some curious, all waiting to see what I would do. My gaze finally settled on Dominic, whose amber eyes burned with something that might have been pride. "What kind of proof do you want?" I asked Garrett. His smile was all teeth. "A hunt. Tonight, under the full moon. If you can keep up with the pack, if you can contribute to the kill, then we'll consider accepting you. And if I can't, then you leave. Tonight. Forever." The terms were harsh, but not unexpected. I'd suspected this confrontation was coming from the moment I'd seen those glowing eyes in the forest. But the thought of leaving, of walking away from this strange new world that called to something deep in my soul, was unbearable. "I accept," I said before I could lose my nerve. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Apparently they'd expected me to back down or demand easier terms. But the wolf in me was offended by their assumptions of weakness, and 18 years of being underestimated had left me with something to prove. "Lyra." Dominic's voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the tension beneath it. "You don't understand what you're agreeing to. A pack hunt is dangerous, I get it." I met his gaze across the room, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "But if I'm going to be part of this world, I need to earn my place in it. You can't protect me from every challenge." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "Very well, but you'll need guidance. Elena will prepare you." The silver-haired woman stood with fluid grace, her smile now genuinely warm. "It will be my pleasure. Come, little Luna. We have much to discuss before moonrise." As I followed Elena from the hall, I caught Dominic's eye one last time. The look he gave me was complex. Part concern, part admiration, and something else that made heat pool in my belly despite the circumstances. Tonight would determine whether I truly belonged in his world, or whether I was just a human girl playing at being a wolf. But as Elena led me through corridors toward whatever training awaited, I realized something that should have terrified me. I was looking forward to the hunt. The wolf in me was eager to run, to chase, to prove itself worthy of the pack that had claimed me. Whatever happened tonight, there would be no going back to the girl I'd been yesterday. That version of myself had died in the sacred chamber, and what had emerged was something wilder, stronger, more alive than I'd ever imagined possible. The only question was whether I'd survive long enough to figure out what that meant. Chapter 5. Lessons in the Wild. Elena led me through the mansion's maze of corridors to a room I hadn't seen before. A library that looked like something from a medieval castle, with floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with ancient texts and scrolls. But it was the weapons mounted on the walls that caught my attention. Silver-tipped arrows, curved daggers with bone handles, and what looked like shackles designed to hold something much stronger than human. Intimidating, isn't it? Elena said, following my gaze. But tonight you won't need any of these. Tonight is about proving you can function as part of the pack, not about combat. She gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs near the fireplace, then settled across from me with the easy grace of a natural predator. Up close, I could see that her amber eyes held depths of knowledge that spoke of centuries rather than decades. How long have you been... I struggled with the terminology. A werewolf? Since birth, like most of us. I'm 137 years old, though I stopped counting after the first century. She said it so casually, as if discussing the weather. Dominic found me when I was barely more than a feral pup, running with actual wolves in the Canadian wilderness. He saved my life, gave me purpose, taught me to be more than just an animal. And now you're going to teach me the same thing? Her smile was enigmatic. That depends entirely on how good a student you are. Tell me, Lyra, what do you remember from your first shift? The memories came flooding back. The pain, the euphoria, the overwhelming sensory input, and underneath it all, that bone-deep certainty that I belonged here. Everything was so intense. The smells, the sounds. It was like experiencing the world for the first time. Good. That means your wolf is strong. Some new shifters barely remember their first transformation. It's too overwhelming for their human minds to process. But you retained awareness, which means you have natural control. She stood and moved to one of the bookshelves, pulling out a leather-bound journal that looked ancient enough to crumble at her touch. This chronicles the bloodlines of every known wolf family in North America. If your wolf blood is awakening, it has to have come from somewhere. For the next hour, we pored over genealogies that read like mythology, families with names like Silverclaw and Moonrunner, bloodlines that stretched back centuries to the first wolves who chose to walk on two legs. Elena traced lineages with her finger, murmuring about dormant genes and unexpected manifestations. Here, she said finally, pointing to an entry that made my breath catch. The Ravenswood line. They were known for late manifestations, wolf blood that could skip generations before awakening unexpectedly. The name meant nothing to me, but as Elena continued reading, details began to emerge that made my pulse quicken. A family known for their strong females, their connection to the wilderness, their distinctive auburn hair. My grandmother, I whispered. My father's mother. Her maiden name was Ravenswood. Elena's eyes lit up with satisfaction. That explains everything. The Ravenswoods were powerful but reclusive. They intermarried with humans frequently, diluting the bloodline. But the wolf always finds a way to surface when it's needed most. Needed for what? For balance, for completion, for fulfilling destinies that were written in the stars long before we were born. She closed the book with a decisive snap. Your bloodline explains why Dominic recognized you as his mate so quickly. The Ravenswoods and the Black Moons have been allies for centuries. Their bloodlines were meant to merge. The idea of predetermined destiny made me uncomfortable. I'd spent my whole life having choices made for me by others, and the thought that even this wild, impossible attraction to Dominic might be nothing more than genetic programming was unsettling. What if I don't want to be anyone's destined mate? I asked. What if I want to choose my own path? Elena's smile was knowing. Oh, little Luna. You still think this is about duty and obligation, don't you? Tell me, when you look at Dominic, when you're near him, what do you feel? Heat flooded my cheeks, but I forced myself to answer honestly. Like I'm finally home. Like every part of me that was missing suddenly makes sense. That's not genetics, child. That's soul recognition. Your wolf knows its match, not because someone else decided it, but because two spirits have found their completion in each other. Before I could process that revelation fully, she was standing again, moving toward a cabinet filled with what looked like outdoor gear. Enough philosophy for now. If you're going to survive tonight's hunt, we need to work on practical skills. The next several hours were a crash course in werewolf basics. Elena taught me how to shift more smoothly, how to embrace the transformation instead of fighting it, how to retain my human consciousness while in wolf form. She showed me how to use my enhanced senses, how to track scents and identify threats, how to communicate with the pack through body language and subtle sounds. But most importantly, she explained the hierarchy that governed pack dynamics. Dominic is the alpha, absolute authority, final word on all pack matters. His word is law, and challenging him publicly is essentially a death sentence. She handed me a bottle of water as I recovered from another practice shift. As his mate, you would be Luna, second in command, responsible for the emotional and spiritual welfare of the pack. Would be? That's what tonight will determine. Garrett isn't just challenging your right to be here. He's challenging your right to lead alongside Dominic. If you fail the hunt, you forfeit any claim to Luna's status. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. What exactly does a pack hunt involve? Elena's expression grew serious. We hunt as a unit, 20 or more wolves working together to bring down prey that would be impossible for any individual to tackle alone. Tonight's target will likely be an elk or moose, something large enough to test your abilities. And what if I can't keep up? What if I slow everyone down? Then you'll learn that pack loyalty goes both ways. We protect our own, even when they stumble. Her amber eyes held mine steadily. But Lyra, you won't stumble. I can smell the strength in you, see it in how quickly you're mastering these skills. You were born for this life, even if you didn't know it. As the sun began to set, Elena led me to yet another room, this one filled with practical clothes designed for shifters. Pants with reinforced seams that could withstand transformation, shoes that could be kicked off quickly, shirts made from materials that wouldn't shred completely when a human body suddenly doubled in size. Change into these, she instructed. And remember, once the hunt begins, you follow pack protocol absolutely. Stay with the group, follow Dominic's lead, and don't try to be a hero. Injured wolves are dead wolves. I was changing clothes when she spoke again, her voice softer now, almost maternal. Lyra? For what it's worth, I think you're exactly what this pack needs. Dominic has been alone too long, carrying burdens that would break a lesser man. He needs someone strong enough to stand beside him, not behind him. What kinds of burdens? She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of old grief. The kind that come from being responsible for every life in this territory. The kind that come from making impossible choices and living with the consequences. The kind that come from loving too deeply in a world that punishes such vulnerability. Before I could ask what she meant, a howl echoed through the mansion. Long, haunting, and undeniably commanding. My newly awakened wolf responded instantly, every nerve ending coming alive with anticipation. That's the gathering call, Elena said. Time to prove you belong here, little Luna. As we made our way toward the main entrance, I caught sight of myself in a hallway mirror. The girl looking back at me was still recognizable, but everything about her was different, sharper, more focused, more alive. My eyes held flecks of gold that hadn't been there before, and my movements had gained a fluid grace that spoke of predatory confidence. Whatever happened tonight, whoever I'd been before was gone forever. The only question was whether who I was becoming would be strong enough to survive in Dominic's world. The pack was gathering on the mansion's front lawn, 20-plus figures silhouetted against the rising moon. Even in human form, they moved with the coordinated precision of natural hunters, and I could feel the excited energy building as the lunar pull grew stronger. Dominic stood at their center, and when his eyes found mine across the darkening grounds, I felt that familiar electrical connection snap between us. But tonight, there was something different in his gaze. Hunger, yes, but also a fierce protective instinct that made my wolf preen with satisfaction. Mine, that wild part of me whispered. Pack. Home. As the moon climbed higher and the first transformations began, I realized I was about to discover whether those instincts were right, or whether I was just a human girl about to get herself killed in the most spectacular way possible. Either way, there was no turning back now. Chapter 6. The Hunt. The transformation under the full moon was different from my first shift in the sacred chamber. Where that had been painful and chaotic, this felt like coming home, my body eagerly embracing its wolf form as the lunar energy washed over the assembled pack. Around me, 20 other figures were undergoing the same change, their human shapes blurring and reshaping into creatures of fang and fur and primal power. But even in the midst of my own transformation, I was acutely aware of Dominic. His shift was a thing of terrible beauty, controlled, graceful, and absolutely alpha. His wolf form was massive, easily a third larger than any other member of the pack, with midnight black fur and those unmistakable amber eyes that seemed to glow with inner fire. When he looked at me, I felt recognition thunder through my bones. Alpha. Mate. Mine. The pack moved as one unit through the forest, and I quickly understood why Elena had emphasized following protocol. This wasn't random running. It was a coordinated hunting party with specific roles and hierarchies. The younger wolves ranged ahead as scouts, the elders flanked the group to prevent prey from escaping, and the core fighters stayed close to Dominic as the pack's leadership. I found myself naturally falling into position near Elena, who seemed to have appointed herself as my mentor for the hunt. Through the pack bond I was only beginning to understand. I could feel her guidance. Stay close. Watch for signals. Don't break formation. The scent hit us all at the same time, rich, musky, alive. Elk, my wolf-enhanced senses told me. A large bull, somewhere ahead in the deeper forest. Around me, the pack's energy shifted from excited to deadly focused. This was what we'd come for. Dominic's howl split the night. Not the gathering call from earlier, but something deeper, more primal. A hunting song that spoke to every predatory instinct I'd never known I possessed. The pack responded instantly, spreading out in the complex pattern Elena had tried to explain to me. And then, we were running. Nothing could have prepared me for the pure joy of it, racing through the moonlit forest with supernatural speed and grace, every obstacle anticipated and overcome without conscious thought. My wolf body was built for this, designed by evolution to be the perfect pursuit predator. Branches that would have torn human skin slid harmlessly past my fur. Rocks that would have twisted an ankle became launching points for greater speed. But more than the physical exhilaration was the emotional connection. Through the pack bond, I could feel the others, their excitement, their focus, their absolute trust in each other and in Dominic's leadership. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to belong somewhere. The elk's scent grew stronger, and ahead I caught glimpses of movement through the trees. The bull was massive, easily 800 pounds of muscle and antler and wild fury. In human form, it would have been suicide to approach such a creature. But we weren't human anymore. Dominic's tactical howl sent the pack into its final positioning. The younger scouts circled wide to drive the elk toward the main group, while the stronger fighters prepared for the actual takedown. I tried to follow Elena's earlier instructions about staying back and observing, but my wolf had other ideas. The elk burst into our clearing in full flight, its antlers lowered and its eyes wild with panic. But instead of running past us toward safety, it turned to fight, a desperate, cornered animal choosing to face death rather than flee from it. That's when everything went wrong. One of the younger wolves, barely more than a pup, misjudged his approach. Instead of staying coordinated with the pack, he lunged early, driven by inexperience and moon madness. The elk's antlers caught him across the ribs with a sickening crack, and he went down hard, blood spreading across his silver fur. The pack's formation dissolved into chaos as several wolves broke position to help their fallen member. The elk, sensing opportunity, charged toward the gap in our circle, directly toward where I stood frozen in shock. Time seemed to slow as 800 pounds of furious wildlife bore down on me. I could see every detail, the foam around the elk's mouth, the deadly points of its antlers, the determined fury in its dark eyes. My human mind screamed at me to run, to get out of the way, to let someone else handle this. But my wolf had different ideas. Instead of fleeing, I found myself lunging forward. Not at the elk directly, but at its front legs, going for the tendons that would cripple its charge. It was a move born of pure instinct, the kind of pack hunting tactic that had been encoded in my genes since before humans built cities. My teeth found their target, and the elk stumbled, its charge faltering as pain shot through its injured leg. That moment of vulnerability was all Dominic needed. He hit the elk from the side like a black thunderbolt, his massive jaws closing on its throat in the killing bite that ended the hunt. Silence fell over the forest as the great elk's struggles stilled. Around me, the pack began to shift back to human form, and I found myself doing the same without conscious thought. The transformation felt natural now, as easy as breathing. But it wasn't until I was standing on two legs again that I realized what I'd just done. I'd participated in a kill. I'd taken down prey with my teeth, had tasted blood and found it satisfying in a way that should have horrified me. "Well," said Garrett's voice from behind me, and I turned to see him approaching with something like grudging respect in his pale green eyes. That was unexpected. Around us, the pack was buzzing with excitement and approval. The injured young wolf was already healing, his supernatural metabolism closing his wounds even as Elena fussed over him. But their attention wasn't on him anymore. It was on me. "She didn't hesitate," someone said admiringly. "Went straight for the takedown, like she'd been hunting with us for years." "Did you see that move?" Pure instinct, perfect execution. Dominic appeared beside me in human form, magnificently naked and utterly unself-conscious about it. When his hand touched my shoulder, I felt that familiar electrical connection, but now it was overlaid with something new. Pack bond, alpha recognition, the acknowledgement that I had proven myself worthy. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. I took inventory of my emotions and was surprised by what I found. "Alive," I said simply, "more alive than I've ever been." His smile was proud and possessive and tinged with something that might have been relief. "The pack bond is complete. You're one of us now, truly and completely." Around us, the wolves were beginning the ancient ritual of the hunt's end, sharing the kill, strengthening pack bonds, celebrating another successful venture into the wild. But Garrett stepped forward before the festivities could begin, his expression serious. "The challenge is satisfied," he announced, his voice carrying to every member of the pack. "She has proven her worth in the hunt. I withdraw my objections to her place among us." It wasn't quite an apology, but from someone as proud as Garrett, It was as close as I was likely to get. More importantly, the other wolves nodded their agreement, and I could feel their acceptance settling around me like a warm cloak. But even as relief flooded through me, I noticed something troubling in the forest around us. The normal sounds of night creatures had gone silent, and there was a scent on the wind that made my newly awakened wolf senses prickle with unease. Dominic had noticed it too. His head was tilted, listening to sounds too faint for human ears, and his expression was growing dark with concern. "What is it?" Elena asked, moving to stand beside us. "We're being watched," Dominic said grimly. "Something's been following us since we left the estate." The pack's celebratory mood evaporated instantly as 20 pairs of enhanced senses turned toward the darkness beyond our clearing. Whatever was out there, it was good at staying hidden. I couldn't see or hear anything definitive, but the feeling of being observed was unmistakable. "Southern Territory Scouts?" Marcus suggested, appearing at Dominic's other side. "Too close to our lands." "They wouldn't dare." Dominic cut himself off, his nostrils flaring as he caught a scent that made his eyes blaze with fury. "No, not scouts. Something else. Something that doesn't belong in these mountains." A howl echoed through the forest, but not from any member of our pack. This was different, wrong somehow, carrying notes of madness and hunger that made every wolf present bare their teeth in response. "Rogue!" Elena breathed, her face pale with fear. The word sent ice through my veins. Even as new as I was to this world, I'd heard whispers about rogues. Wolves who'd been cast out from their packs, who'd let their animal natures consume their humanity entirely. They were dangerous, unpredictable, and utterly without mercy. And apparently, one had been stalking us. "Back to the estate," Dominic commanded, his alpha voice brooking no argument. "Now, stay together, protect the wounded, and whatever you do, don't separate from the group." As we began our retreat through the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that our successful hunt had just become the opening move in a much more dangerous game. Whatever was out there in the darkness, whatever had been watching us, it felt personal. Like it wasn't just hunting any wolves, like it was hunting me. Chapter 7: Shadows and Secrets. The journey back to the Black Moon Estate was nothing like our joyous run into the forest. Where before we'd moved with the coordinated grace of natural hunters, now we traveled with the tense vigilance of prey being stalked. Every shadow could hide danger. Every sound might herald attack. I stayed close to Elena as instructed, but my newly awakened senses were on high alert. The scent that had triggered Dominic's alarm lingered on the wind, wild and bitter, tinged with something that made my wolf recoil in instinctive disgust. Whatever was out there wasn't just rogue, it was diseased, corrupted, fundamentally wrong in a way that violated every natural law. "Lyra." Dominic's voice was barely above a whisper, but in the supernatural silence of our formation, it might as well have been a shout. "When we reach the estate, go directly to your room. Don't stop, don't look back, and don't open the door for anyone but me or Elena." "What about the pack?" "We'll be fine. This isn't about them." His amber eyes found mine in the moonlight, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. "This is about you." Before I could ask what he meant, another of those wrong, twisted howls split the night. Closer now, close enough that it seemed to be coming from multiple directions at once. The pack's formation tightened instinctively, the stronger wolves moving to shield the younger ones. But I could feel their fear through the pack bond. Whatever was hunting us, it was something even experienced predators were afraid of. We made it to the estate's outer perimeter without incident, but instead of feeling safer, I found my anxiety increasing. The mansion's lights seemed dimmer than usual, the grounds too quiet, as if the very earth was holding its breath in anticipation of violence. Dominic's hand found mine as we approached the main entrance. His skin was burning hot, and I could feel the barely controlled tension in his grip. Remember what I said. Your room now. But before I could take a step toward the house, Marcus appeared from the shadows near the front door, his scarred face grim with news that made my stomach clench with dread. Alpha, he said, his voice carrying the weight of disaster. We have a problem. Dominic released my hand, every line of his body shifting into combat readiness. How bad? 3 of our border sentries are missing. No bodies, no scent trails, just gone. And there are signs of struggle at the eastern boundary marker. When? Within the last hour. Whatever took them knew exactly where to strike for maximum damage. The pack had gathered around us now, and I could feel their growing alarm through our bond. 3 missing wolves was more than a random attack. It was a declaration of war. It's not random, Elena said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Someone's testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. Or sending a message, Garrett added grimly. The timing is too convenient. The same night we accept a new pack member, rogues suddenly appear in our territory. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of their suspicion like a physical blow. You think I brought this here? I think your appearance has triggered something, Garrett replied, his tone carefully neutral. The question is what and why? Before anyone could respond, a new scent hit me. Familiar, but wrong. It took a moment to place it, but when I did, ice flooded my veins. Margaret? I whispered. Dominic's head snapped toward me. What? My stepmother. I can smell her, but she's... I struggled to put the sensation into words. She's different. Changed. The implication hung in the air like poison. If Margaret was here, if she'd somehow been turned or corrupted, then my past had quite literally come back to haunt us all. Inside, Dominic commanded, his alpha voice cutting through the pack's growing panic. Everyone inside now. Full lockdown protocols. The mansion's great hall had been transformed into a war room. Maps of the territory covered every available surface, marked with positions of missing sentries and potential breach points. The pack's senior members clustered around tables, their voices low but urgent as they planned defensive strategies. But Dominic pulled me aside, away from the tactical discussions, and into a smaller adjacent room, lined with weapons and ancient texts. Tell me everything about your stepmother, he said without preamble. Everything, no matter how insignificant it might seem. I struggled to organize my thoughts, still reeling from the night's revelations. She married my father when I was 12. Always seemed cold, calculating. After he died, she became obsessed with money, with status, with finding ways to climb the social ladder. Did she ever show any interest in the supernatural? Unusual books, strange visitors, anything that seemed out of place? The question triggered a memory I'd buried. Margaret's late-night phone calls in languages I didn't recognize. The way she sometimes stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Her insistence on selling me to the highest bidder, rather than finding other solutions to our financial problems. She knew, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Somehow, she knew what I was before I did. The way she looked at me sometimes, like she was evaluating livestock. God, she knew about the wolf blood. Dominic's expression darkened. If she's been corrupted, if someone's using her as a weapon against us... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I'd seen enough supernatural politics in the last 24 hours to understand the implications. Margaret wasn't just a threat to me. She was a threat to the entire pack. There's something else, I said reluctantly. The night before she brought me here, she had a visitor. I didn't see who it was, but I heard voices. One of them wasn't human. What did they discuss? I couldn't make out most of it, but I heard my name. And something about the bloodline and ancient debts. The memory made me shiver. At the time, I thought they were talking about money my father owed. But now it sounds like she sold you for reasons that had nothing to do with financial debt. Dominic moved to one of the weapon displays, selecting a silver-bladed dagger with practiced ease. Someone wanted you specifically, Lyra. Your bloodline, your potential. You weren't a random bride purchase. You were a targeted acquisition. The implications were staggering. Everything I'd believed about my situation, about the arranged marriage, about my stepmother's motivations, it was all a lie designed to get me exactly where someone wanted me. But why? What could they possibly want with me? Before Dominic could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the mansion. The sound was deafening, designed to wake every pack member and summon them to battle stations. Marcus burst through the door, his face grim. They're at the gates. Multiple contacts, moving fast. And Alpha ... He hesitated, his scarred features troubled. One of them is broadcasting on human frequencies. She's demanding to see her stepdaughter. My blood turned to ice. Margaret was here, and she hadn't come alone. Through the mansion's reinforced windows, I could see lights moving through the forest. Dozens of them, surrounding the estate with military precision. Whatever force my stepmother had brought, it was large enough and organized enough to pose a real threat to the pack. How many? Dominic asked, already moving toward the weapons cache. At least 50, possibly more. A mix of rogues and something else. They move wrong, smell wrong, like they're not entirely alive. Revenants. The word appeared in my mind unbidden, accompanied by images from the ancient texts Elena had shown me. Wolves who'd been brought back from death, their souls corrupted, and their bodies preserved by dark magic. They were stronger than living wolves, faster, and completely without mercy or fear. She's made a deal with something powerful, I whispered. The pieces finally clicking together. Margaret didn't just know about my bloodline. She's been planning this for years. Dominic's amber eyes blazed with fury. Then we end this tonight. Marcus, full defensive positions. Elena, get the younger pack members to the safe rooms. And get me a direct line to the southern territories. If this escalates, we'll need allies. As the pack mobilized around us, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something new. A fierce protectiveness for these people who had accepted me, who had made me part of their family. Whatever my stepmother wanted, whatever dark forces she'd allied herself with, she would have to go through me to get it. What can I do? I asked. Dominic paused in his weapon selection, his gaze intense. You can trust me to protect what's mine. And you can remember that you're not the frightened girl who arrived here yesterday. You're Pack now. You're Luna. The title sent strength flowing through my veins. Luna. Not just Dominic's mate, but the Pack's second in command, responsible for their spiritual and emotional welfare. Whatever happened tonight, I would not let them down. A tremendous crash echoed through the mansion as something large and angry struck the main doors. The lights flickered, and through the pack bond I could feel everyone's tension spike. They're not waiting for dawn, Marcus reported grimly. They're coming in hard and fast. Another crash, and this time I heard the splintering of reinforced wood. Whatever was attacking the doors was strong enough to tear through barriers designed to stop supernatural predators. Time to go, Dominic said, pressing a silver knife into my hands. Stay close, follow orders, and remember, aim for the heart or the head. Anything else just makes them angrier. As we moved toward the great hall where the pack was making its stand, I caught one last glimpse through a window. In the courtyard beyond, illuminated by flickering torchlight, I could see my stepmother clearly for the first time since arriving at the estate. She was still recognizably Margaret. The same cold blue eyes, the same perfectly styled blonde hair, the same calculating expression I remembered from childhood. But there was something fundamentally different about her now. Her skin had a waxy, artificial quality. Her movements were too fluid, and her eyes reflected light like an animal's. She'd been turned into something between life and death, something that retained her memories and intelligence but had lost her humanity entirely. And she was staring directly at the window where I stood, her lips curved in a smile that promised pain and retribution. "Hello, stepdaughter," I heard her say, her voice carrying impossibly clearly through the glass and stone. "Did you really think you could hide from your obligations? From your destiny?" The main doors finally gave way with a sound like thunder, and chaos erupted throughout the mansion. But even as I prepared to fight for my new life, my new family, my new world, one thought echoed through my mind. This was never about an arranged marriage or financial debt. This was about something far older, far more dangerous, and far more personal than I'd ever imagined. The real battle for my soul was just beginning. Chapter 8. Blood Bonds and Betrayal. The Great Hall erupted into a war zone as Margaret's forces poured through the shattered doors. The first wave consisted of rogues, wolves who'd lost their humanity to madness and bloodlust. But behind them came something worse. The revenants Marcus had described, their movements too smooth, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. I'd never seen a battle between supernatural predators before, and the violence was overwhelming. The air filled with roars and screams, the crash of furniture being used as weapons, the wet sound of claws meeting flesh. My newly awakened senses made every detail brutally vivid. I could smell the copper tang of spilled blood, hear the sound of bones breaking, feel the pack's terror and fury through our bond. But through it all, my attention kept returning to Margaret. She moved through the chaos like a queen surveying her domain, untouchable in the midst of violence that would have killed any normal human instantly. When one of our pack members, a young wolf I barely knew, tried to attack her directly, she caught him by the throat with casual strength and threw him across the room hard enough to crack stone. "Where is she?" Margaret's voice cut through the battle's din, coldly conversational despite the carnage surrounding her. "Where is my dear stepdaughter hiding?" Dominic materialized beside her like a shadow given form, his partially shifted state making him a terrifying blend of man and predator. When he struck, it was with the speed and precision of someone who'd spent decades perfecting the art of violence. But Margaret moved faster. She caught his clawed hand in her own, her grip strong enough to stop his attack cold. When she smiled, her teeth had changed, no longer human canines, but something sharper, more predatory. "Dominic Blackmoon," she purred. "The great Alpha King. Tell me, how does it feel to know you've been played from the very beginning?" "What are you?" he snarled, trying to break free of her grip. "I'm what your little mate is destined to become," Margaret replied. "What she's always been meant to become, once she reached the age of awakening." She released him and stepped back, gesturing to the battle raging around us. "Did you really think this was random? That a scared little girl would just happen to manifest rare bloodline traits at precisely the moment she entered your territory?" The implications hit me like a physical blow. "You've been planning this since I was born." Margaret's cold blue eyes found mine across the chaos, and her smile widened. "Since before you were born, darling. Your father thought he could escape his family's legacy by running off with some human woman, by pretending to be normal. But bloodlines always assert themselves eventually. My father knew what I was. Your father was a coward who tried to deny what he was. But his death provided the perfect opportunity to guide you toward your true destiny." She took a step closer, and I noticed that the battle around us had begun to pause. Rogues and revenants alike turning to watch our confrontation. Do you want to know how he really died, Lyra? It wasn't a car accident. The world seemed to tilt around me. My father's death had been the catalyst for everything. Our financial ruin, my stepmother's desperation, the arranged marriage that had brought me here. If that had been orchestrated... You killed him, I whispered. I liberated him from a life of mediocrity and self-denial. And I ensured that his daughter would fulfill the destiny he was too weak to embrace. Margaret's form began to shift, revealing the true nature of whatever she'd become. Her skin took on a translucent quality, her bones elongated, and her eyes became wells of silver light. You see, darling, the Ravenswood line isn't just any wolf bloodline. We're descendants of the first pack, the original wolves who learned to take human form. Our blood carries power that modern packs can barely comprehend. Elena appeared at my side, silver knife gleaming in her hand. Ancient bloodlines, she breathed. That's what this is about. She wants to awaken your full heritage. More than that, Margaret continued, her transformed state making her voice echo strangely. I want to bind that heritage to a power older than any pack, older than the treaties and territories that limit modern wolves. She gestured, and the revenants around us moved into formation, not attacking, but creating a ritual circle with me at its center. I realized with growing horror that this entire assault had been designed to get me exactly where I was standing. The old gods still exist, Lyra, Margaret said, her words carrying the weight of revelation. The primal forces that gave birth to our kind in the first place. They've been sleeping for centuries, but they're awakening, and they need a vessel with the right bloodline to anchor them to this world. You're talking about possession, Dominic snarled, moving to stand protectively in front of me. You want to turn her into some kind of avatar for ancient spirits. I want to give her the power she deserves, the power to reshape this world, to make it what it was always meant to be, a realm where the strong rule and the weak serve. Margaret's silver eyes blazed with fanatical fervor. No more hiding from humans, no more pretending to be civilized. Just pure, primal dominance. The revenants began to chant in a language older than any human tongue, and I could feel power building in the air around us. Dark, hungry, eager to find a new host. My wolf recoiled from it instinctively, recognizing something fundamentally wrong with the energy Margaret was trying to channel. But even as I prepared to fight, to resist whatever ritual she was attempting, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Part of me was responding to the power. The same bloodline traits that had awakened my wolf were resonating with whatever ancient forces Margaret was calling upon. I can feel it in you, she whispered, her voice now carrying harmonics that bypassed rational thought and spoke directly to something primal and hungry. The recognition, the awakening hunger for true power. You were never meant to be some pack wolf's mate, Lyra. You were meant to be a goddess. The chanting reached a crescendo, and ethereal forms began materializing around us. Spirits or demons or ancient gods. I couldn't tell which. They reached toward me with incorporeal hands, seeking to merge with my awakened bloodline, to use my body as an anchor point between their realm and ours. No, I said, and was surprised by the strength in my own voice. I choose my own destiny. Margaret's expression shifted to fury. You don't have a choice. The ritual has already begun. The old powers have already marked you as theirs. That's when Dominic struck, not at Margaret, but at the ritual circle itself. His claws raked across the ancient symbols carved into the floor, disrupting the geometric pattern that channeled the spirit's power. The ghostly forms wavered and began to dissipate, their connection to our reality severed. But the backlash was immediate and devastating. Energy that had been building for the ritual had to go somewhere, and it chose the path of least resistance, directly into me. Pain like nothing I'd ever experienced tore through my body as conflicting powers warred within my bloodline. The wolf Margaret had awakened fought against the ancient spirits trying to claim me, while my human consciousness struggled to maintain control over both. I could feel myself changing, evolving, becoming something that had never existed before. When the transformation finally stabilized, I was still recognizably myself, but enhanced beyond anything I'd thought possible. My senses were sharper than any wolf's, my strength greater than any human's. My awareness expanded to encompass realms of existence I'd never imagined. And I was furious. "You killed my father," I said, my voice now carrying harmonics of power that made the mansion's windows rattle. "You manipulated my entire life, used me as a pawn in some ancient game of power." Margaret took an involuntary step backward, clearly not expecting this result from her ritual. "Lyra, you don't understand." "I understand. Perfectly." I could feel the pack's amazement through our bond, could sense Dominic's fierce pride and protective instincts, could perceive the fear radiating from Margaret's revenants. "You wanted me to become something more than human. Congratulations, you succeeded." When I moved, it was with speed that defied physics. Margaret barely had time to raise her hands in defense before I was there. My own hands transformed into something between claws and human fingers, capable of rending both flesh and spirit. "But you made one critical error," I continued, my enhanced senses allowing me to perceive the dark magic that animated her undead state. "You assumed I would want what you were offering." I struck, not at her physical form, but at the spiritual bonds that kept her tethered to unlife. The ancient powers she'd called upon had left me with knowledge I shouldn't possess, abilities that belonged to no single species. Margaret's scream was the sound of something fundamentally wrong being corrected. The magic that animated her began to unravel, her carefully preserved form starting to decay as the natural order reasserted itself. "This isn't over," she gasped as her revenants began collapsing around her, their connection to their master severed. "The old powers have marked you now. They'll keep coming, keep trying to claim what you've become. Let them come," I replied, and meant it. Whatever I was now, wolf, human, something entirely new, I was strong enough to face whatever challenges awaited. As Margaret's form finally crumbled to dust and her forces fled into the night, I turned to find Dominic watching me with an expression that mixed awe, desire, and something deeper than either. "How do you feel?" he asked, the same question he'd posed after my first shift. I took inventory of my new abilities, my enhanced senses, the way power now flowed through my veins like liquid fire. "Different," I said finally, "but still me. Still yours, if you'll have me." His smile was fierce and possessive and full of promises that made heat pool in my belly. "Always," he said simply. But even as he pulled me into his arms, even as the pack began celebrating our victory, I couldn't shake Margaret's final warning. The old powers had indeed marked me, and something told me this battle had been just the beginning of a much larger war. Whatever I'd become tonight, whatever destiny awaited me, at least I wouldn't face it alone. I had a pack now, a mate, a family worth fighting for. And I'd proven I was more than strong enough to protect them all. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. The aftermath of the battle left the Black Moon estate looking like a war zone. Shattered furniture, cracked walls, and bloodstains on ancient stones told the story of violence that would take weeks to repair. But despite the destruction, there was an energy of celebration in the air. The pack had faced a supernatural threat and emerged victorious, stronger than before. I stood in the great hall as dawn light filtered through broken windows, watching pack members tend to their wounded and begin the process of rebuilding. The enhanced abilities Margaret's ritual had awakened in me made every detail vivid. I could see the relief in their faces, smell the lingering adrenaline in their blood, feel their gratitude and acceptance through the pack bond. But more than that, I could sense something that hadn't been there before. Respect. Not just for what I'd done in battle, but for who I'd chosen to become. "The council wants to make it official," Elena said, approaching with her arm in a makeshift sling but her amber eyes bright with satisfaction. "A formal Luna ceremony, witnessed by the entire pack. The prospect should have terrified me. More supernatural politics, more ancient rituals, more binding myself to a world I still barely understood. But instead, I felt a deep rightness about it. This was where I belonged, with these people, in this life I was still learning to navigate." "When?" I asked. "Tonight, under the new moon. It's traditional. The Luna bond is sealed in darkness, emphasizing the spiritual rather than the physical connection." Elena's smile was warm with maternal pride. "Though, given what you've become, I suspect tradition will need some updating." What I'd become? That was the question everyone was dancing around, but nobody wanted to address directly. Margaret's ritual had changed me in ways that went beyond simple wolf awakening. I was faster, stronger, more intuitive than any normal shifter, and I could perceive layers of reality that others couldn't access. "Have you figured out what I am yet?" I asked Elena directly. Her expression grew thoughtful. "Something new. The old bloodlines were diluted over centuries of human intermarriage, but when they awaken under the right circumstances..." She shrugged. "You're what our ancestors were before we learned to limit ourselves. Pure potential, unbound by modern restrictions." Before I could ask what that meant, Dominic appeared beside us with the silent grace that had become familiar. He'd changed from his battle-worn clothes into jeans and a dark sweater that emphasized his powerful frame, but there were still healing scratches visible on his hands and throat. "The perimeter's secure," he reported to Elena, then turned his full attention to me. "How are you adjusting to the changes?" "Still figuring that out," I admitted. "Everything feels... more intense, more complex, more alive." His smile was understanding. "That will stabilize over time. The important thing is that you're still you, just enhanced rather than replaced." We were interrupted by Marcus approaching, his scarred face serious despite the pack's overall celebratory mood. "Alpha, we've got a situation developing. The Southern Territories have been asking questions about last night's battle. Word is spreading that something significant happened here." Dominic's expression darkened. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest they're wondering whether the Northern Pack has developed capabilities that might upset the current balance of power." Marcus glanced meaningfully at me. "Specifically, they want to know if the rumors about ancient bloodline awakening are true." The implications were clear. In the supernatural world, power imbalances led to conflicts, and conflicts led to wars. If other packs perceived my enhanced abilities as a threat to the established order, we could be facing challenges from multiple directions. "Let them wonder," Dominic said with quiet authority. "The Northern Pack's internal affairs are not subject to outside scrutiny. With respect, Alpha, they may not see it that way, if they believe we've gained an unfair advantage." Marcus trailed off, but his meaning was clear. "Then they'll discover exactly how much of an advantage it is," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "I won't hide what I am to make others comfortable." Both men looked at me with expressions that mixed surprise and approval. Elena actually laughed, the sound bright with delight. "There's the Luna we've been waiting for," she said with obvious satisfaction. Not backing down, not apologizing for being powerful. The rest of the day passed in preparation for the evening's ceremony. Elena explained the rituals involved, ancient rites that would formally bind me to the pack as their spiritual leader, responsible for their emotional welfare and cultural continuity. It was a responsibility that should have felt overwhelming, but somehow it felt natural, like a role I'd been unconsciously preparing for my entire life. Mrs. Chen appeared with a dress for the occasion, not the elaborate gown I'd expected, but something simpler and more meaningful. Deep forest green silk that moved like water, with silver embroidery that depicted wolves running beneath stars. It was beautiful without being ostentatious, elegant without being impractical. The pack's seamstresses worked all day to finish it, she explained as I held the dress up to the light. Every stitch was made by someone who accepts you as their Luna. The gesture moved me more than any grand pronouncement could have. These people, my people now, had taken time from their recovery efforts to create something beautiful for me, to show their acceptance in the most personal way possible. As evening approached, the pack gathered in the mansion's garden, an area that had escaped most of the previous night's damage. Torches had been placed around the perimeter, creating a circle of flickering light against the darkness. The new moon meant no natural illumination, but somehow that felt appropriate. This ceremony was about internal light, spiritual connection, bonds that existed beyond the physical realm. I stood at the circle's center, hyper-aware of every detail through my enhanced senses. I could feel the pack's excitement and anticipation, could smell the lingering wildness on their skin from recent transformations, could hear the rapid heartbeats that spoke of emotional intensity. But most of all, I was aware of Dominic. He stood directly across from me, magnificent in formal black that emphasized his powerful frame and predatory grace. When our eyes met across the circle, I felt that familiar electrical connection. But now it was overlaid with something deeper: pack bond, mate recognition, the acknowledgement of shared destiny. Elena began the ceremony with words in the old language, syllables that predated human civilization and spoke directly to the wolf spirit. I couldn't understand the literal meaning, but the intent was clear. Recognition, acceptance, binding. One by one, pack members stepped forward to offer their personal acceptance. Marcus, despite his initial suspicions. The young wolf who'd been injured in our hunt, his ribs still bandaged but his eyes bright with gratitude. Even Garrett, whose challenge had started this entire chain of events. I accept Lyra Ravenswood as Luna of the Northern Pack, each said in turn. Her strength is our strength, her wisdom our guidance, her protection our shield. When it was Dominic's turn, he moved to the circle's center to stand beside me. Up close, I could see the depths of emotion in his amber eyes: pride, possession, love, and something deeper that had no name. I accept Lyra Ravenswood as my mate, my equal, my completion, he said, his voice carrying to every member of the assembled pack. What threats come for her come for me. What power flows through her flows through us all. What future she chooses becomes our shared destiny. Then it was my turn to respond, to make my own commitment to these people who had accepted me, protected me, helped me discover who I truly was. I accept the role of Luna of the Northern Pack, I said, my voice stronger and more confident than I'd expected. Your welfare is my responsibility. Your safety, my priority. Your future, my commitment. What I am because of you. What I become for you. Elena stepped forward with an ancient silver circlet, not a crown, but something simpler and more meaningful. A band of metal worked with wolf imagery, designed to rest lightly on the wearer's head without dominating their appearance. By moon and star, by earth and sky, by blood and bond, she intoned, placing the circlet on my head. The Northern Pack acknowledges Lyra Ravenswood as their Luna, their spiritual guide, their protector and leader. The pack's response was immediate and overwhelming. A howl that started with one voice and spread to encompass everyone present. Not the hunting call I'd heard before, but something deeper, more primal. A song of welcome, of acceptance, of family. As the ceremony concluded and pack members began to disperse into smaller groups, Dominic remained beside me, his presence steady and reassuring. "How does it feel?" he asked, the question that was becoming our tradition. I considered the weight of the circlet on my head, the strength of the bonds I could feel connecting me to every pack member, the responsibilities I'd just accepted. "Right," I said finally. "Like coming home." His smile was radiant with joy and satisfaction. "Then we've chosen well, Luna." As we walked back toward the mansion, I caught sight of our reflection in one of the unbroken windows. The woman looking back at me was still recognizably Lyra, but everything about her was different, stronger, more confident, more complete. She wore power like a comfortable garment, carried herself with the grace of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. 3 days ago, I'd been a frightened girl sold into marriage to pay someone else's debts. Tonight, I was Luna of the Northern Pack, mate to an alpha king, keeper of ancient bloodlines and modern responsibilities. The transformation was complete, but somehow I knew this was just the beginning. Margaret's warning echoed in my memory. The old powers had marked me, and other challenges would come. But whatever the future held, I would face it with the strength of my pack, the love of my mate, and the knowledge that I was exactly where I was meant to be. For the first time in my life, I was truly home. Chapter 10. Forever Wild. 6 months later. The morning sun filtered through the bedroom windows of our private wing, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. I woke slowly, luxuriously, aware of Dominic's arm around my waist and the steady rhythm of his breathing against my neck. Even in sleep, he held me with a possessiveness that should have felt confining, but instead made me feel cherished, protected, claimed in the most fundamental way. The past months had been a whirlwind of change and growth. The pack had rebuilt stronger than before, our bonds deepened by the trials we'd faced together. The supernatural community had eventually accepted the reality of my enhanced abilities, though not without some tense negotiations and careful diplomacy. And I'd grown into my role as Luna in ways I'd never imagined possible. But perhaps most importantly, I'd learned to trust the connection between Dominic and myself. Not just the mate bond or the pack politics, but the simple, complicated reality of loving someone completely. "You're thinking too loudly," Dominic murmured against my hair, his voice rough with sleep and contentment. "It's barely dawn." "Just remembering," I said, turning in his arms to face him. Even first thing in the morning, he was devastating. Dark hair mussed, amber eyes warm with affection, the powerful lines of his body relaxed in a way he only allowed when we were completely alone. Remembering what? That first night. How terrified I was. How certain I was that my life was ending instead of beginning. His smile was soft with understanding. "And now?" I considered the question, taking inventory of everything that had changed. I could feel the pack through our bond. Elena teaching a group of young wolves about pack history, Marcus coordinating border patrols, even Garrett working with new recruits who showed promise as warriors. They were my responsibility, my family, my pride. Beyond that, I could sense the larger world we inhabited, other packs in their territories, the delicate balance of supernatural politics, the ever-present potential for conflict or alliance. As Luna, I was part of a network that spanned continents, connected to wolves I'd never met but who looked to our pack for leadership and guidance. And underneath all of that was this, the man in my arms, the love that had grown from necessity into something that defined both our lives, the partnership that made every challenge bearable and every victory sweeter. Now I know that sometimes the best things in life are the ones that scare you most, I said finally. His kiss was gentle but thorough, a good morning greeting that spoke of permanent claim and endless affection. When we broke apart, his eyes held depths of emotion that still took my breath away. "I have something to show you," he said, sliding out of bed with that fluid grace that never failed to make me appreciate the view. "Get dressed." Something warm. 20 minutes later, we were walking through the forest that surrounded the estate, following paths I'd learned by heart over the past months. But instead of heading toward the usual pack-gathering areas, Dominic led me deeper into the wilderness, to places I'd only seen during full moon runs. The morning air was crisp with the promise of autumn, carrying scents of pine and earth and the wild creatures that shared our territory. My enhanced senses cataloged everything: the distant sound of a stream, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, the complex layering of scents that told the story of everything that had passed this way in recent days. "Close your eyes," Dominic said when we reached a clearing I didn't recognize. "Dominic? Trust me." I'd learned to do that completely, so I closed my eyes and let him guide me forward another dozen steps. When he told me to look, what I saw made my breath catch in my throat. He'd built us a house. Not a mansion like the estate, but something more personal and intimate. A beautiful cabin of native stone and timber that seemed to grow from the landscape itself, with wide windows that would let in natural light and a wraparound porch that overlooked a valley I'd never seen before. "It's ours," he said quietly. "Separate from pack politics, from pack responsibilities. A place where we can just be Dominic and Lyra, not Alpha and Luna." I walked toward it in a daze, taking in details that spoke of months of careful planning. Gardens laid out but not yet planted, waiting for my input. A workshop area where Dominic could pursue hobbies that had nothing to do with pack leadership. Space for children, someday, when we were ready for that next step. "When did you—" I couldn't finish the question, too overwhelmed by the gesture. "I started planning it the night of your Luna ceremony. I wanted to give you something that was just ours, separate from everything we inherited or claimed or fought for. The house was perfect. But more than that, it represented something I'd never thought to want. A future that was chosen rather than imposed, built rather than inherited, shared rather than solitary." I turned to find him watching me with an expression of barely contained hope, and realized he was waiting for my reaction, uncertain whether he'd overstepped or presumed too much. Instead of answering with words, I kissed him with all the love and gratitude and fierce joy that was too big for language. He responded instantly, his arms coming around me as if he'd been waiting for exactly this confirmation. "I love you," I said against his lips, the words I'd learned to say easily over the past months, but which still carried the weight of miracle every time I voiced them. "And I love you," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "More than pack, more than territory, more than anything else in this world." We spent the morning exploring our future home, planning modifications and discussing dreams that had seemed impossible just months before. But as the sun climbed higher and pack responsibilities began calling us back to the estate, I realized something that made me smile. "We never talked about children," I said as we walked hand in hand back through the forest. Dominic's step faltered slightly. "Did you want to?" "Eventually. Not right away. I'm still figuring out how to be Luna, and there are challenges coming that will need all our attention. But someday." I looked at him sideways, gauging his reaction. "What do you think enhanced bloodline genetics plus alpha genetics would produce?" His smile was slow and devastating. "Something extraordinary. Something the supernatural world has never seen before. Something that would probably keep us very busy. The best things in life usually do." As we approached the estate, I could see pack members going about their daily routines, training, studying, maintaining the territory that was home to all of us. Elena waved from the garden where she was teaching young wolves about medicinal plants. Marcus nodded respectfully from his position coordinating security patrols. Even Garrett offered a brief salute that acknowledged both his acceptance of my authority and his respect for what I'd become. 6 months ago, I'd been an 18-year-old girl with no family, no prospects, and no understanding of what I was capable of becoming. Today, I was Luna of the Northern Pack, mate to the most powerful alpha in North America, keeper of bloodline abilities that made me unique in the supernatural world. But more than any title or ability, I was home. I was loved. I was exactly where I was meant to be. Ready for another day of being responsible for everyone's welfare? Dominic asked with gentle humor. I squeezed his hand, feeling the strength and certainty that had grown from necessity into choice, from survival into thriving. As long as you're beside me, I'm ready for anything. His smile was answer enough, but he said it anyway. Always. As we walked into the estate together, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the great hall's windows. Alpha and Luna, partners and equals, two people who had found in each other not just love, but completion. The frightened girl who had arrived here was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, more alive than I'd ever imagined possible. Whatever challenges the future might bring, and I had no doubt there would be many, we would face them together. With the pack at our backs, love in our hearts, and the knowledge that sometimes the best destinies are the ones we choose rather than the ones chosen for us. I was 18 when I was forced to mate a 50-year-old alpha king. What happened that night changed everything. But what happened in all the nights after, that was what made me who I was meant to be. Forever wild, forever his, forever home. Epilogue. 1 year later. The Luna ceremony for the newest member of our pack took place under a full moon that painted the world in silver and shadow. I stood at the edge of the ritual circle, watching Elena guide the young woman through the same words I'd spoken a year ago, feeling the familiar tingle of pack bonds extending to encompass another soul. Sarah had come to us 3 months ago, a refugee from a pack that had been destroyed by hunters, traumatized and barely able to shift. But Elena's patient guidance and the pack's acceptance had helped her heal, and now she was taking her place as a full member of our family. By moon and star, by earth and sky, by blood and bond, the assembled pack chanted, their voices joining in the ancient words that never failed to move me. Beside me, Dominic's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with a familiarity that still sent electricity up my arm. A year of marriage, of shared leadership, of facing challenges together, and he could still make my heart race with a simple touch. Thinking about your own ceremony? He asked quietly. Thinking about how much has changed. I gestured toward the circle, where Sarah was receiving the same silver circlet that had marked my own acceptance. A year ago, I didn't even know worlds like this existed. Now I was Luna of the Northern Pack, mother figure to dozens of wolves, negotiator in supernatural politics that spanned continents, and keeper of abilities that were still evolving in ways that surprised everyone, including myself. The ceremony concluded with the traditional howl of welcome, and as pack members began to disperse into smaller groups for the celebration feast, Sarah approached us with eyes bright with gratitude and belonging. "Thank you," she said simply, "for giving me a home when I thought I'd lost everything." "That's what family does," I replied, meaning it completely. "Welcome home, Sarah." As she walked away to join the celebration, I felt that familiar sense of rightness that had become the cornerstone of my new life. This was what I'd been meant for, not just being Dominic's mate, but being a leader, a protector, a beacon for those who needed guidance. "The Southern Territories have requested a meeting," Dominic said quietly, his alpha instincts never fully at rest, even during celebrations. "Next week," They want to discuss potential alliances. I nodded, unsurprised. The supernatural world was always shifting, always forming new partnerships and dissolving old ones. As the Luna of one of the most powerful packs in North America, I'd become a key figure in those negotiations. Any particular reason? Rumors of something stirring in the far north. Ancient powers awakening. Old territories shifting. His amber eyes found mine, serious despite the festive atmosphere around us. They want to ensure they're on the right side if something significant happens. The mention of ancient powers made me think of Margaret, of the ritual that had changed me, of the warnings about old gods marking me for their attention. In the year since that night, I'd grown stronger, more capable, more in tune with abilities that seemed to have no defined limits. But I'd also learned to sense when those powers were stirring, when something in the deeper layers of reality was paying attention to our world. And lately, that sensation had been growing stronger. "We'll handle it," I said, the same response I'd given to every challenge we'd faced together. "Whatever comes, we'll face it as a pack." Dominic's smile was fierce with pride and love. "Have I mentioned lately how incredible you are?" "Only every day, but feel free to mention it again." He pulled me closer, his lips brushing my ear in a gesture that sent heat flooding through my veins. "Later," he promised, his voice rough with desire that even a year of marriage hadn't diminished. "When we're alone, I'll show you exactly how incredible I think you are." The promise made me shiver with anticipation, but before I could respond, Elena appeared at my elbow with that knowing smile that suggested she'd overheard more than she was letting on. "Luna, there's someone here to see you. Says she's family." My blood chilled. The only family I had left was... "Not her," Elena said quickly, reading my expression. "Someone else. Someone who claims to know about your father's side of the family." We found her waiting in the great hall, a woman who looked to be in her 40s with auburn hair that matched mine, and green eyes that held depths of knowledge I recognized from my own reflection. She stood with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to dangerous situations, but there was nothing threatening in her posture. "Lyra," she said as we approached, her voice warm with genuine affection. "You look exactly like your father did at your age." "I'm Catherine Ravenswood, your aunt." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My father said his family was all dead. Your father said many things to protect you from a world he was trying to escape. Catherine's smile was sad but understanding. "But blood calls to blood eventually, and when I felt the awakening of your abilities 6 months ago, I knew it was time to make contact." She gestured toward the rebuilt Great Hall, taking in the signs of our recent battle and the evidence of pack prosperity. "It seems you've found your place in the world. I'm proud of what you've become." "What do you want?" Dominic asked, his alpha instincts on high alert in the presence of an unknown wolf with obvious power. Catherine's attention shifted to him, and I saw recognition flicker in her eyes. "Dominic Blackmoon, your reputation precedes you, and your protection of my niece has earned you my gratitude." She looked between us, taking in the obvious bond that connected us. "I'm not here to disrupt anything you've built. I'm here to offer information you may need in the coming months." "What kind of information?" "The kind that explains why ancient powers are stirring, why territories are shifting, why the supernatural world is about to face challenges unlike anything seen in centuries." Her expression grew serious. Lyra's awakening was a catalyst, but it wasn't the only one. There are others like her, other bloodlines awakening, other individuals discovering abilities they never knew they possessed. The implications were staggering. If I wasn't unique, if there were others undergoing similar transformations... "How many others?" I asked. "7 that we know of. possibly more. Catherine moved to one of the repaired windows, gazing out at the forest beyond. The old bloodlines are asserting themselves, preparing for something that's been prophesied for generations. What kind of prophecy? The kind that speaks of a time when the barriers between worlds grow thin, when ancient powers return to claim what was once theirs, when those with the strongest blood must stand against forces that predate human civilization. She turned back to face us, her green eyes grave with the weight of revelation. Your awakening wasn't random, Lyra. It was preparation. Dominic's hand found mine, his strength steady and reassuring. Preparation for what? Catherine's smile was sharp with anticipation and challenge. For the war that's coming. The war between the old ways and the new, between those who would drag us back into the shadows and those who believe we can forge a better future. As if summoned by her words, a howl echoed through the night, distant but unmistakably powerful, carrying notes of challenge and summons that made every wolf in the territory raise their heads in response. And it seems, Catherine added with satisfaction, that war is about to begin. I looked at Dominic, seeing my own mixture of determination and excitement reflected in his amber eyes. We'd built something beautiful here, a pack, a home, a love that had transformed both our lives. Now we'd have to fight to protect it. But as I felt the strength of our bond, the loyalty of our pack, the power flowing through my enhanced bloodline, I knew we were ready for whatever challenges awaited. We'd faced Margaret's corruption and emerged stronger. We'd weathered political storms and diplomatic crises. We'd built a foundation that could withstand anything. Let them come, I said, echoing words I'd spoken once before. This pack stands together. This family protects its own. Dominic's smile was fierce with pride and battle-ready anticipation. Together? Always, I replied, meaning it with every fiber of my being. As the distant howl faded into silence, I realized this wasn't an ending at all. It was another beginning, another transformation, another step in a journey that had started with fear and desperation and had led me to strength, love, and purpose beyond anything I'd ever imagined. I was Luna of the Northern Pack. I was mated to the most powerful alpha in North America. I carried bloodline abilities that made me unique in the supernatural world. But most importantly, I was home. I was loved. I was ready for whatever came next. And whatever came next, we would face it together, wild, fierce, and free.